Hi. I chose to do this after the article on how if you had full understanding, then you wouldn't judge anyone. So this is just a little add-on that I go into greater detail in. So let's start. Judgment feels like clarity. That's why it's so convincing. People experience judgment as moral vision, as if seeing something clearly means condemning it correctly. But psychologically, judgment is something else. It's not evidence of insight, it's evidence of missing information. Judgment appears at the point where understanding stops. The less you know about how something came to be, the more confident your judgment feels. That's not a character flaw, it's a cognitive one. When the mind can't hold complexity, it compresses it. It replaces structure with story, it replaces causation with blame, and blame feels decisive, which is why people mistake it for truth. You can see this everywhere. Strangers are judged more harshly than people we know. Distant groups are judged more harshly than familiar ones. This is a prejudice and bias. These are what we do. We judge. We make judgments about people who are not one of us. So let me carry on. Public figures are judged more harshly than private ones. The less access we have to context, history, pressure, constraint and conditioning, the more confident the moral verdict becomes. Distance produces certainty. Proximity dissolves it. If you actually had full information, not selective information, not information that flatters your position, not information that confirms what you already believe, but full information, judgment would no longer be necessary. Not because you'd approve of everything, not because harm wouldn't matter, but because judgment would lose its function. Judgment is a shortcut. It exists to close inquiry. It pretends to create a completed picture when in fact there is no complete picture. We're just adding imaginary pieces to an incomplete jigsaw. And when we do that, we create a totally different picture from the true one, from the real one. So this is what we do. We fill in the gaps. And psychology has been showing this for decades. Attribution research demonstrates that when people lack situational information, they default to dispositional explanations. Behaviour is attributed to character rather than context. And this is an interesting aside here, because, we attribute it to character with other people, but we don't attribute aberrant behaviour by ourselves to character. We attribute it to situation. Why? Because we're probably the most familiar person to us that we have. So anyway, this is what people do. But it's not because people are cruel. It's because causal information is missing and the mind needs an explanation quickly. Judgment fills that gap. This is why judgment feels strong. It arrives with certainty because it ends a search. Philosophy reached this conclusion long before neuroscience had instruments. Spinoza described people as believing themselves free because they're conscious of their actions and ignorant of the causes that determine them. That ignorance doesn't produce neutrality. It produces moral certainty. Where causes are unseen, judgment rushes in. I know I labour this point, but it happens to be true. Spinoza's concept of inadequate ideas is crucial here. An inadequate idea is not false, it's incomplete. It captures an effect without understanding its cause. Judgment is built almost entirely out of inadequate ideas. It feels powerful because it's emotionally charged. but it's structurally weak. It depends on not knowing enough. The more information you have, the less judgment you're going to make. This is why understanding feels threatening. Real understanding does not preserve moral hierarchy. As causal chains become visible, emotional urgency decreases. Hatred softens. Condemnation loses momentum. Not because people become kinder, but because judgment is no longer needed to make sense of what is happening. People resist this because judgment protects identity. Throughout our life, we fabricate an identity. We fabricate the good and the bad. We create stories about everything so that we can survive in the world. This is our identity. It is not real. It is fake. It is our survival mechanism that we built on top of our essence so that we can survive in this hostile world. So, judgment allows you to believe you see clearly because you are better, more disciplined, more moral, more aware, rather than because you are positioned, you're situated, your circumstances. It preserves the fantasy that your clarity is earned rather than accidental. Anything can be an accidental cause of any trigger or emotion you feel. Understanding threatens that fantasy. It shows you how contingent your own behaviour is, how easily you could have been shaped differently under different conditions. This is why moral certainty increases during periods of instability. When people feel uncertain, powerless or disorientated, judgment restores a sense of order. It gives the illusion that someone is steering the ship. Blame becomes a substitute for control. Understanding does the opposite. It removes the illusion of authorship. It replaces moral drama with structure, and structure does not flatter. You can see this dynamic clearly in how people talk about public breakdowns, addiction, violence, collapse. Early responses are harsh and confident. As information emerges, childhood histories, neurological issues, institutional pressures, judgment weakens. Maybe the person just couldn't cope. The judgment doesn't weaken because behaviour becomes acceptable, but because the caricature collapses. The person no longer fits into a simple moral story. What almost no one admits is that judgment existed because information was missing. It was never evidence of moral clarity. It was evidence of epistemic distance. This is the part people struggle with. Understanding does not excuse behaviour. It removes hatred, not consequence. Boundaries remain, responses remain, but the emotional need to condemn loses its justification. Spinoza was explicit about this. Understanding reduces destructive passions because those passions rely on ignorance to survive. Judgment, then, is not discernment. Discernment improves with information. Judgment peaks when information runs out. That distinction matters. People often say, if I don't judge, I'm condoning. That's fear talking. It's the fear that without moral certainty, everything collapses. But what actually collapses is moral theatre, the performance of righteousness that makes people feel anchored. It also makes them feel superior. If they're less, then I am more. So you feel more powerful, more enhanced. But really, it's built on sand. It's not built on structure. Understanding itself is quieter than judgment. That quiet feels like weakness in a culture addicted to outrage. But it's not weakness, it's accuracy. So, if you notice judgment arising, in yourself, in conversations, in your reactions, don't rush to justify or suppress it. Treat it as a signal. It tells you exactly where your understanding stopped. Judgment doesn't mark truth. It marks the boundary of what you don't yet see. Okay.